I just want to make a couple quick announcements before we do a brief round of intros. As I mentioned a second ago, we are for the first time streaming this meeting tonight online and also on the phone. So anyone with a phone line or computer is welcome to join. And this is a test run. It may be kind of choppy, but we have Janine on the phone or online who's gonna check it out and follow it. And then we'll just go from here. But huge kudos and thank you to CTPHE and Janine in particular for making this work. And we'll just see how it goes. But if you know someone who can't be here tonight and would call in or stream, find Kelly in the back and she'll give you the phone number or the website. Also, there's coffee and snacks and thanks so much to Tom and Emily as always. So can we just do a quick round of intros and then we'll talk about what we're doing tonight and get right into it because we have a lot to cover. So I'll start. I'm Ryan Goulton. I know most of you from the Consensus Building Institute, and I'm facilitating the CAG.
Keith Homershin with Tri-County Health Department.
And maybe when you go around, say if you're a member of the CAG, including if you're an ex officio member.
Ex officio.
Tri-County Health Department, ex officio.
Sharon Wilson, community member, not on the CAG.
Thank you.
Tom Kraus, co-chair from for Thunderbird Estates.
Thank you for mentioning where you're from.
India Courthouse. I'm a planner at City of Aurora.
Alice Norman, CAG member, I live in Murphy Creek. Sandy Rash, CAG member, I'm from Murphy Creek also.
Mr. Reader, CAG member, Thunderbird Estates.
I'm Bonnie Rader, co-chair of the CAG from Thunderbird Estates.
Let's handle with EPA, RPM for the site.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Thomas, also with EPA, still relatively new to the project. This is my second CAG meeting, so thank you.
Steve Miller, Arapahoe County, ex officio.
I'm Sarah Teschman. I'm a hydrogeologist.
Thank you. Lee, you want to introduce yourself and we'll go around that way on this second.
Lee Polanco with the State Health Department.
Hi.
Hey.
You want to introduce yourselves back there?
I'm Ryan Nance I'm here on behalf of Blueprint.
And the Blue which works with the Lowry Trust. I'm ready.
Jennifer Webster with the Trust.
Emily Simpson.
Great, thanks. Kelly, you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, I'm Kelly McGregor. I'm with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And just wanted to say too, we are recording the meeting. Hopefully it's going to work. We're crossing our fingers, and it will be available on YouTube to share to everyone afterwards. If you could try, if you speak to, speak up, because that little tiny thing is our mic in the center there, so it could use all the help. Thank you.
Which is great. It'll help us all here anyway, so I might remind us to speak up a little bit. Okay.
EPA, Jennifer Harrison, Community Involvement Coordinator, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight.
Bonnie, I know you mentioned there's a number of people who can't be here tonight for vacation, trip, and health reasons. So I know that it would be really great if this turns out to work and we can record this meeting, and then the website, the YouTube site, will be shared via the CAG website. Okay.
So I just want to mention that for those that aren't here.
Can you speak up a little?
Sonia has to work. Margie has to work. Jill had surgery, so she and Jim can't be here. Emily isn't here, but she has given Tom her proxy. All of the others have given their proxy to me, and John is traveling here. So those people can't be.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for passing along the information. And so as everyone knows, and I think everyone's seen the agenda, and first of all, raise your hand if you did not get an agenda over here. So Lee, there's a bunch behind where Jennifer's sitting.
Right.
There are agendas. There's also meeting summaries from the March meeting, and there's two handouts you should have. One is sort of a timeline, a 1,4-dioxane timeline, and the other is the PowerPoint that Sarah's going to go through tonight that you can take notes on. So if you raise your hand, Jennifer can pass this out if anyone doesn't have one. It looks like everyone's got one. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so as you all know, the focus of tonight's meeting is really in many ways the heart of what we've been getting to in the last several months since we started this CAG, is really delving more into You need something?
Or whatever that is.
You need whatever that is. Whatever that is, I need it. Delving more into the understanding the plume, understanding the history and status of delineating the plume. We're going to start getting more into the details of that and both the history and the current status. So again, this is my guess is this is going to be the first of many on this topic. So if for folks who can't be here tonight, I think that, CAG members can bring other people up to speed so that, and then probably the next meeting will pick up, is my guess. We'll see how it goes. So before we get into the substantive purpose of the meeting, a couple of things. I just wanted to note that if you look at your summary from the last meeting, there were a whole bunch, like maybe 10, 12 action items that were promised to this CAG, at least to attempt to get folks. This list of documents, of resources, of actions, most of these were accomplished. And I just thought I'd go through them very briefly to make sure, just to get any updates on them. But I know that EPA and CDPG in particular did a lot to make sure these were followed through with. So with the CAG, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, shared with the CAG was this, and I'm starting at the top line on this chart from the March meeting summary, was the site file index and administrative file index, was the site record index from CDPHE, the discharge permit that Steve Richtel made available and we circulated to the CAG, that from the water treatment plant. I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some work done on the definition sheet, and Margie was going to get in touch with Karen Hancock if she needed more help with that. But there was some that was circulated. There was, we followed up on the site tour. I know EPA did, and we'll have a quick update on that later. I know that Sean from Aurora emailed the Sand Creek permit and the past annual report. There was a link that was shared to the DMR by Karen and or others. And I know that Janine, I think, is still researching. Does anyone know anything more about this? Still researching options for sharing Appendix A. I'm sorry, Appendix G of that status report. So, because I know that that's been tricky, and I think she's working on that. Do you know anything more about that?
It's not so much sharing, it's getting Microsoft access.
Finding a way to, yeah. And so, okay, so that we may have hit a dead end, and we may have to just, if people want access to it, someone might have to get Microsoft access.
Maybe, yes.
But I think they're still looking into that. Now, yeah,
I was able to take one of the files and go through some iterations and open it up in Excel.
oh,
But it's gonna take a while to do every one of them, but I was able to get one of them open.
Lee looks pained for you. Are you paying for her?
Yeah, that's the hard way, but it's a way, so.
Thank you. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
one way. And it sounds like we're not totally at a dead end, but that may be.
No, I think Janine will have more to offer, but
Okay.
unfortunately, it's a software issue. It's-
Okay.
And it's such a common program, it's hard to say.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I know Janine couldn't be here tonight, but she's on streaming it, but she will be here at the next meeting. So we'll hear from her on that. Okay, and then last but not least, finding low-tech options to record CAG meetings to make them available, and here we are. So I think, a lot has happened this month. I think all of those were pretty minor compared to the work that's been done to prepare for this meeting and sharing the kind of substantive information that people have really needed. So anyway, that's a quick update. Fun.
Are you done with your?
I'm done.
Okay. The CAG members met. That's what you're saying. The CAG members met for a work study session, and we came to the conclusion that we needed to write a letter and a resolution. And I would like to take just a minute to explain this. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
That is okay. Please.
All right. The first thing that we were concerned about is the fact that the 5-year review is now out, and we've received a letter of comment back from Denver and the EPA's response back to them. CAG members are really, really concerned about the water issues. The revised groundwater monitoring plan, and we And so what we did was we adopted a document from Clean's old document that was written by their technical advisors, because we haven't had a chance to hire a technical advisor or get the grant yet.
Right.
And we feel that the documents are still pertinent and relevant. And so we put together a letter to Rebecca and Les, and I have copies here. Basically, so everybody can kind of understand what our concerns were. Number one, we'd like to compliment EPA Region 8 on the clarity and accuracy of EPA's most recent comments back to the city of Denver, because to us, it's the first time since the 2001 EPA Region 8 5-year review that we've had that we feel the EPA is really zeroed in on the issues that are important and is talking about what we can do to rectify some of the things that haven't been done in the past. The second thing is we wanted to note that the current available information on offsite conditions hasn't changed since 2014, and that since the change in the 1,4-dioxane standards in 2013, 0.35 has always been the target, and it's not a moving target. And by allowing the WSDs to use 0.9 as a target at Lowry, EPA is not keeping up with the 2014 goals. The last thing is that we sent Clean's comment we have now adopted as the Lowry Landfill Superfund Site tag document. And that information, that document was written February 9th, 2015, sent to Les Sims, and it's regarding the revised groundwater monitoring plan. And so we've attached a copy of that document, and we could not find it in the latest list of documents that EPA has been putting on for us to look at. So there's 3 items. The first page is the copy of the letter to Rebecca and Les. The second item, attachment 1, is the comments from 2015. We'd like EPA to have their contractors take a close look at them. And then the third marked item is attachment 2, and it's a summary of the issues in the February 9th letter that have not yet been addressed. And so I'm going to pass this out to everybody to have a copy. If anybody would like to have copies sent to them by email, I'll be happy to. There you go, Leslie, pass these down. And then, so we can get off with things, and thank you for letting us do this now, because we find at the end of the meeting, we're so busy talking.
No, this is a good time to do this.
Okay, so.
No, this is, yeah.
So the second thing that we did was we, as a group, wrote what we call a resolution, and it has to do with the issue of whether or not the shallow wells in the area are safe for human consumption. And so, Tom, did you want to read the resolution?
Right, the background, and if I start coughing, I'm gonna have you take over.
Okay.
In 2004, at least basically, the background is that we're concerned whether or not there has been proof that no one is drinking water that contains 1,4-dioxane. And we're concerned about wells in the area which haven't been tested. And there are statements made by Tri-County Health, City of Aurora, and the WSDs to make the claims there's no threat to human health because no one is drinking the water. Not sure that's been tested and proven. And rather, we can't contest it and say that it's not true, but we can say that it's not proven. And therefore, we would like to have the that statement removed from public purview. In the background is the citizens group Clean in 2014 is told by some area residents that they are using private domestic wells located directly in the path of the off-site plume. They are shallow at 40 to 50 feet deep. Clean reports at this time that the information to the EPA, or reports this information to the EPA and requests that EPA tests those shallow wells. CPPHE, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, encourages EPA to test the wells. EPA at that point refuses. In 2015 5-year review, I'm sorry, question C, has any other information come to light that could call in question the effectiveness of the remedy? And the answer from EPA is that yes, there are several private and municipal wells located within the drainage. 4 of these wells are located within the footprint of the 1,4-dioxane plume, and well, one is located immediately adjacent to the plume. In order to ensure that there is no current human exposure, these wells should be sampled and analyzed for 1,4-dioxane. Based on the results, appropriate remedial action implemented. Sorry, Bonnie, I want you to continue.
EPA on March 14th, in a 2018 letter to David Wilmot, City of Denver, page 6, item 7, OU1, issue 7, institutional controls. EPA's comment, the primary objective of the current EPA-approved offsite plume delineation work plan remains incomplete. This effectively makes the assertion that offsite plume contaminants pose no threat to human health or the environment premature. The Lowry Landfill Superfund site tag members continue to hear Tri-County Health, the City of Aurora, and the WSDs make the claim there is no threat to human health because no one is drinking the water. The WSD Lowry website continues to support this claim. Recently, EPA Region 8 added the 2008 Lowry fact sheet to the documents available to the public, which supports this position. Therefore, in the interest of technically correct advice being the basis for dissemination of information to the public, Lowry Landfill Superfund site tag members resolve that until the agencies test the shallow wells and can provide the data to support that the water is safe for human consumption, EPA should remove the 2008 fact sheet from EPA's public information repository, and that EPA should require Tri-County Health, the City of Aurora, and the WSD cease using this unverified information, which misleads the public and encourages development in the area.
And Bonnie, Tom, is that resolution request, making that ask for that request of those entities, has that been circulated beyond just?
No.
So that's being presented tonight, and
Yes.
we'll follow up.
Everything is being presented tonight, and in the long run, in the end, we'll send it to everybody that's on the CC list on the letters.
So it sounds like that specific request is to EPA, Tri-County Health.
And then one last, Rebecca, I apologize. We also wrote a letter regarding the revised groundwater monitoring plan. And we wrote a letter to you and to Deanna Crumling asking that we advised Deanna Crumling of the injection of potable water at the site, because the last correspondence we read from Deanna was 2014, and she was not at all aware of the injection of potable water at the site. And so we feel it's, Les mentioned at the last meeting that he was going to be working with Deanna as well. We think she needs to be brought up to date on that. And so we wrote a short letter to you and also to Deanna, and we need you to please forward it to her because we don't have any contact information directly for her.
You sent it to me already? Because I
No,
good.
that's what I'm saying. I really apologize. It's coming. It was supposed to be here right now. And we pointed out, and I apologize. So,
Well, don't apologize. I can get that organized.
okay.
So the heads up, that's a heads up to Rebecca that you're going to get this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I need you to be aware of that because EPA Region 8 is the agency in charge here. But we do think that EPA headquarters, Deanna Crumling, does need to understand this issue better so that she can help with the work being done on the revision of the groundwater monitoring plan.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely great.
Okay. I am glad that, thank you for those updates from the community members. And I know that along similar lines, I know that EPA wanted to make some updates, some of which pertain to some of the things you were just talking about. So if that works, I think the way that we're going to do this tonight, if this works for everybody, is to do the rest of the updates, which, you know, are pretty substantive. And then we're going to turn to Sarah in maybe 15, 20 minutes when we get through those to walk us through some substantive information that pertain to the handouts we've got. So
I'll
Rebecca,
start,
would
if
you
that's okay.
start? Would you start? And can you remind people who you are at EPA, just so
Yes,
some
of
people
course.
didn't.
Well, I said earlier, this is just my second CAG meeting, so I'm still relatively new to the project. I work for EPA here in Denver. I work with Les at EPA. If you remember, my predecessor, Steve Wharton, I know that he's been to a few of the CAG meetings, and we're doing this sort of professional development rotation. So I'm doing Steve's job for this period of 4 months, so I'll be around through mid-June, and I'm happy to be able to participate in this project and do what I can in this short time period. It's been very interesting to me, and with all my years of experience at EPA, I've never been out to the Lowry landfill, so it's all good. So that's who I am. I wanted to first thank you for bringing this letter tonight, and also the resolution. Obviously, we're not in a position to respond to either the letter or the resolution tonight, although I think I will cheat. I looked at Jennifer just to make sure. We have removed that 2008 fact sheet from our
Good.
website now. I think that
Thank
was done earlier this week, maybe.
Thank you.
Oh, and I checked
Was it that?
earlier today, and it should be, I didn't see it.
Oh, I just saw it, I think, Monday or Tuesday, Monday.
I checked today,
Good.
it should be gone.
Let Jennifer know if you see
Thank
it.
you.
I looked this morning, so if I missed it, let me know. And I'll
Thank
make
you
sure it's
very
gone, but
much.
We recognize that it has inaccuracies. That's decided by the agency.
Thank you so much, EPA. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course. And Bonnie, I'll look forward to the letter and that on to Deanna Crumling and
Great.
share that information. And maybe we can use some of the information resolution and the 2 pieces of correspondence to help guide what we might want to talk about at the next
Okay.
CAG meeting.
Good, thank you.
That'd be great. Let's see what else here. I was glad to hear Ryan use the word substance tonight. I think that's what EPA is really striving for in these CAG meetings, and I hope that tonight we're bringing a little bit more substance than maybe we have for at least the past few CAG meetings. I know that Les has a few quick technical updates to make. Jennifer Harrison will provide us with a few community engagement updates. And then I'm delighted that Sarah Teschner, our hydrologist, has been able to join us tonight. And we think we're being quite responsive to the requests of the CAG. Sarah will present a timeline giving the history of the plume delineation, and Les might chime in with a few next steps there. And then Sarah's also prepared with kind of a high-level briefing of the report, the progress report that was submitted by the work settling defendants last September. And on that point, I kind of thought Dave Wilmuth would be here. I do want to let the CAG know that the work settling defendants offered to, in May, provide an in-depth technical discussion of their September progress report. And that option or offer is still on the table. I think Sarah's not going to get into quite the technical detail that they might. They couldn't do it this month because their CDM Smith contractor, Steve Fundingsland, was on travel this week. But if there's interest among the... I don't know. I have no idea. But anyway, if there's still interest, we could certainly request that the work settling defendants provide that next month, or if the group feels that we get enough information from Sarah this evening, perhaps we move on to other topics.
And
next
Rebecca,
month.
Jennifer's hand is up in the back.
Rebecca Jennifer
Yes.
Webster with Blueprint. Dave Bowman
Yes.
just watching
I was
and
just gonna
discussing
say.
traffic.
Oh,
So
I was just talking about you, Dave. Welcome.
Were your ears ringing, your nose itching, or ringing and itching happening at the
It's just
same time?
allergies.
Just allergies, that's it. Could be allergy to EPA, let's hope.
But Rebecca, along those lines, my understanding is that even though, tonight we are going to have some discussion led by Sarah of that progress report from November, that the work settling defendants are planning to have offered to have yes, so there's nodding happening in the back, to really embellish and add to that at the May meeting. So I think Dave's plan to be probably relatively in tonight, but that we're not going to turn to you, but that our understanding is that in May, we'll be hearing more from you all.
Yeah, our understanding is more of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
If the CAG wants that, we might, so, yeah. Okay, what else? Okay, the only other new thing, and this is actually news that I have today, and Bonnie, I'm glad you actually brought up Deanna Crumling with our headquarters office. There is a lot of interest in this project, both in our regional office and in our headquarters office. You know that Patrick Davis, who's a special advisor to our political appointee, regional administrator Doug Benevento, has been to a couple of these meetings. Well, I found out this morning that Aaron Chancellor, who's out of our headquarters office, is very interested in coming out to tour the site on April 27th. So she reached out to me today to see if that kind of a tour could be organized. Aaron Chancellor is an attorney from Texas. She's working for our headquarters office now, and she's in the Administrator Pruitt's office, working directly for a man named Kel Kelly, who's a special advisor to Scott Pruitt. So she has an influential position. I don't want to raise anybody's expectations or think that she's coming to tour the project with any particular expectations or ideas in mind. I think she's just interested in the project. She's trying to familiarize herself more with Superfund sites generally. She's been working for the agency for about 6 months. So I'm trying to organize that tour. I've kind of scrambled around a little bit today, trying to get it organized. Lee has agreed to be on the tour. Les is available next Friday. And Bonnie and Tom, I wanted to offer up if someone from the CAG would like to join that Friday for the tour. And also Dave, if somebody from the work settling defendants would be interested, certainly not required. Again, no expectation, but if there's an interest in meeting Aaron Chancellor and touring the site and having kind of an informal conversation, I think a small group we could pull together and that would all be welcome. And we haven't set a time for that yet. Aaron's only constraint is a lunch engagement at 12:30 near the CDPHE office in Denver. So we could do a tour either in the morning or in the afternoon that day.
And Rebecca, can people follow up with you at the end of this meeting if they're interested? Some of the folks that you just mentioned, and maybe to share any time constraints or time suggestions. Okay.
I'll hang out after the meeting if you're interested in participating, great, and we'll get it organized. And with that, I would like to turn it over at this point in time to Les for some quick technical updates, and then we'll go over to Jennifer for some community engagement, and then get to the real substance of the meeting with Sarah Teschner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And it will be quick. First thing, since you did mention Dana Crumling, I actually spoke with Dana Crumling. I've been speaking with her over the past couple of days about the statistical model. And she says hi, number one. And it's funny that you're bringing questions to it, because the first thing she said was, besides just doing the audit for the statistical model, I want to make sure that the community is covered in terms of any questions that they may have. So the sooner the better we can get that to Dina. I just provided her with the statistical data for the most recent O&M report. So she's on the job on that, and she welcomes any questions that you may have from the community as well. Okay. And Rebecca had mentioned a couple of documents, and you provided these, and including the 2008 letter regarding the water injections and the potential impacts to the plume and surrounding area. And I can tell you that we have a high level of confidence that the five-year review recommendations related to those efforts will address this issue. That's our hope. That's the whole purpose of us putting this together and going forward with the scheduled work. Speaking of that, so we've had, of the recommendations provided, we've had 3 work plans that have been submitted, 2 actually work plans that have been submitted, and 1 that EPA it pretty much took up the cause and went forward with addressing. The landfill gas work plan that updates the toxicity value for performance standards for the site is under review by our RAC contractor. That's Renewable Action Contract contractor there, our technical support folks, the science and engineers that make us look good and write these nice letters for us and put our name on it. The POTW, the publicly owned treatment waste pipeline is, the work plan has been submitted along with the designs. This address or will address the capacity issue of the water treatment plant that was identified in the 5-year review. That work is scheduled to begin this summer. We received the work plan and the design last week. I've been meeting with my contractors all week, and I provided that package to them yesterday. So they were in the process of reviewing that document. And that once EPA finishes with the review, and we'll certainly give CDPHE an opportunity to review that document as well, we'll be more than happy to give the opportunity to the community to take a look at that before it's finalized, our response is finalized.
And if, Les, if folks have questions while you're giving this quick update, can I ask you, are you comfortable? I mean, I don't know if you have questions, but if anyone wants to clarify anything that Les is saying, I think short questions to clarify.
Or afterwards, if you write it down, I'll stick around for a while. So just to keep everything flowing. Okay. And EPA has picked up one of the issues in the 5-year review, namely pertaining to the analytical program. There was some disparity in the different analytical methods that were being used. Without getting into the weeds, we had our contractor actually look at refining that process so we have better correlation in the data, including the 1,4-dioxane and the analysis of results. So what we've been busy with the past few weeks is pretty much just putting together our technical team. That's been taking most of my time, long hours and weekends, but we feel that it's really important to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed in terms of our technical expertise that are available, so we can hit the ground running and actually be productive, when that opportunity comes, when that time comes. We're looking at several contracts as well as technical support. We have PWT and Tetra Tech that will handle everything from wastewater treatment plant to engineering components related to the groundwater issues, the portable injection issues. They're involved. We have a team for optimization that will support the WSDs and as well as capture zone analysis. We have, as I mentioned, Dina Crumling, that it's not a 5-year review issue, but it is an important issue that we need to make sure we cover on the stats model that's used to determine compliance. She's in the process of completing that audit. And we've also reached out to ERT for overall support. ERT is the environmental response team. They're high-level technical support. If I could use an analysis, it would be compared to if you're in the Army, the Green Beret. They're high-level engineers and scientists, and we feel it was really important to get someone with that level of expertise, especially since pertaining to the water injection issues. We want to make sure we have all the bases covered. So we've been working on some tools to enhance our capability to conduct the work as well as do our oversight job. We have a program that we've been working on for 2 years. It's the 3-dimensional visualization that we're having roll out hopefully soon. We've actually used it, but the data that we've used is kind of dated, and we need to get synoptic contemporaneous data that would give that advantage of seeing what's happening subsurfacely. It's not the silver bullet, but it's a very useful tool we're finding, and I think it would not only help in terms of compliance, but in some of the efforts in updating the CSM, the site conceptual model, and doing optimization. It's a very good tool to be used in that regard. So that's pretty much it. Sarah's going to give the overview of the delineation effort that was completed in September. But in terms of the status of that effort, the work that has been completed to date, including the installation of the Sentinel well, pretty much completes what we refer to as phase one of the delineation effort. We think it's a step in the right direction, but we don't totally concur that the objectives are going to be achieved by that particular work effort. So again, Sarah will give the bird's eye view in terms of what was accomplished, but that's not the end. Just because the Centennial well is in place, that's just one step of many to come. And it will be useful data from that well. It's not the end of the story. The well was installed, I think, in March, completed in March. And the plan is, according to the work plan and talking to Tim Shanger of the day, the plan is to sample that well quarterly, on a quarterly basis. We can. Absolutely. Yeah. You write that down? Yeah, we can do that. We will do that. I think that's it for now. Unless you have something else, Rebecca?
I do, in fact. I have to take my turn back. And this is kind of funny. I finished my remarks, and about 30 seconds later, I get a text message from Jennifer. You forgot to say such and such. So I think it's like the modern day equivalent of getting kicked under the table, right? And then Ryan didn't stand it either, and she just passed me a note. You forgot to talk about this. So it's an important thing, and I'm glad to have all the reminders, and I'm sorry I forgot earlier. So we are trying to do a better job with our communication. We're delighted to have Ryan helping facilitate these CAG meetings, and Ryan has assisted with at least one meeting between EPA and the state, CDPHE. And we've also recently engaged with the work settling defendants, a facilitator, to help that communication move forward as well as we start to work through some of these 5-year review issues, just to make sure that we're all sharing information appropriately and making good, solid progress. And of course, the CAG will be sharing in that as well, the information that we're able to share and the work that we get done.
Does anyone, before we go on to some community engagement updates, does anyone have any questions about anything that Les just said on the technical updates? In terms of clarifying anything that didn't make sense? Yes.
I used an acronym PLTW.
PLTW?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Publicly Operated Treatment Works is just a wastewater treatment plant. That's where everything goes from site to be treated.
Version of water treatment.
Water treatment plant. That's what it is. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Whenever you have things like that, other people are wondering the same things.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other clarifications? Jennifer, do you want to give a quick update from them?
Yeah, and it's really brief. I just wanted to quickly revisit the February letter that we had sent to EPA. And thank you again for that letter, and let you know, because regarding document sharing, those of you are familiar, I just want to reiterate that we are continuing to work carefully on this. We have added, I think, another 20 documents to our webpage. Of course, we provided a site file to the volume earlier this week or so ago now, with documents, the entire file from 2 operable units, the ones that pertain to the offset home, and we can provide more of that if we need to. We are continuing to work very closely with the state to systemize an approach that will allow for more transparency and, when appropriate, allow for comments wherever that makes sense. So stay tuned. We'll definitely have more to share in the future, but I just wanted to know that it's very serious.
Excellent. Nicole, do you want to say a quick welcome? You just walked in. Hi.
Yes, hi. I've missed you all. I've missed the last couple of meetings. My name is Nicole Johnston. I am the Aurora City Council person and represent this area. I'm also, as part of Aurora City Council, I have to serve on committees, and I'm on the Public Safety Committee in Courts that goes till about 6:30 the same day as this. So I ran over here. I first went the last time I was I met with you all. I was at the Vista Peak Exploratories. So then I figured out, so I apologize for being late. And I am going to have to leave a little before 7:30 and see my children before they go to bed tonight. But I just wanted to let you know, I've been following this. I read all the emails. I'm sorry I'm not always able to be here, but it's near and dear to my heart. And anything that I can do, I'm here. Thanks.
And Nicole, you missed the early announcement, but Janine and CDPG have set up a system where we're streaming these
Great.
meetings
Okay.
Online and by phone, and they'll be available afterwards
Okay.
on the CAG website. Just so you know.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you for all the updates, really, really helpful. And I think unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. And I think, Sarah, do you want to explain a little bit about your proposed approach, and then we can let people know how we envision the next hour or so going?
Okay. So it was communicated to me that the CAG was interested in a timeline of when dioxane at the site just kind of laid out in one place. I think this piggybacks off of what Jennifer was describing. Well, with the fact that we've got a lot of new documents online that are available now, but drudging through a bunch of documents is kind of tough to do. It's tough to align what goes where and when and why. So I guess what I put together, and this is draft, it's so draft that I'm finding pretty major typos. I tried to get it together in a bit of a rush for this meeting. It's had a lot of input, and I haven't blended it all perfectly. It's also not completely comprehensive, so there are, not every detail is captured, but I tried to get the majority of the big picture items. So I was going to just sort of give an overview of what this document is. It's more of a resource than something I'm going to be up here presenting on, and maybe give some background for some of the concepts and topics on it. And then after that, go in straight into that progress report that it was also communicated to me that the CAG wanted to hear, okay, what is this progress report? What's being presented here? And that actually gives a bit of a picture, a summary of sort of the most recent end of this timeline. So it sort of transitions nicely.
So we were thinking that this should be a discussion that Sarah's going to walk through this timeline. If you have questions, are you comfortable with people asking the questions? But keep in mind that after going through the overall the timeline on this handout, she's then going to talk specifically about the progress report and give some context for that. So if your questions are more about recent history in the last 9 months, then you might save your questions for that later discussion, because that discussion is that fair?
And just to sort of orient everything, this discussion is for what we refer to as the north end plume. So it's the site 1,4-dioxane concentrations north of the site. This is a map from the 5-year review that we need to get something like this on one of these. It would be really helpful for being able to focus these discussions. But so here's the Lowry Landfill Superfund site, and this plume extends north. It's a little bit weak, but luckily I had this with me. So if you wanted to come up and see, look at this map for an idea of the area we're talking about. There's the site. There's Mississippi Avenue up here. So I've got zoomed in figures of some of these spots from the progress report too.
Would it disrupt your presentation if you just pass that around quickly, just so that we can see that, and we'll make sure you get that?
Good idea.
Yeah.
And you're going to try to get this on a poster board at some point, maybe?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Could you maybe scan it and send it to us in an email?
There you go.
it is online. It's a figure in the 5-year review.
It's figure 3.
So, maybe I'll just dive right into sort of talking about the timeline.
So raise your hand if you don't have this handout. Does everyone have this handout? Nicole, you got it? Okay.
No.
Here, I'll get you one.
Thank you, sorry. So it's to be continued.
And my understanding is we want to get this posted online. This, what you have is a draft. It has typos. It's not clean, and I feel a little bit neurotic about having it out there with typos in it, but did what we could in the amount of time. So again, I'm not going to run through all of these. This is more of a resource, but I want to just provide some context for some of the pieces. And actually, I'll refer first to the PowerPoint handout. I just stuck in there on the last slide. Last time I gave a presentation, which was October, I had walked through a example using sugar of different concentrations and how to think about them. And I did that verbally, and people followed up with questions about that, like, let me hear that again. So I stuck it on here so that you could read through that. So half a teaspoon of sugar in a 2-liter bottle of soda is about 1 gram per liter. At this site, we're usually talking in micrograms per liter. Again, using sugar, because it's something we're familiar with. 2 grains of sugar in a 4-person hot tub, that's about 1 microgram per liter. That in no way says anything about toxicity, but it's just sort of, okay, milligrams per liter, what does that mean? Micrograms per liter, what kind of volumes does that look like? Just gives that picture a little bit. So I just wanted to point that out, because as we go through this, we do talk about very different concentrations depending on where we're sampling. So I guess some of the things I will point out, I think, and I don't have this on here, and it's something I'm considering adding, although I want to get more specific detail about it. I think it was in 97 was the first time 1,4-dioxane was sampled and detected at the site, and that was on site. In 2003, the work settling defendants, we all know what is meant by that term, detected 1,4-dioxane in shallow groundwater monitoring wells north of the site. So it was that point at which sort of this investigation began. Not officially yet, but that's sort of when the red flags went up. Well, then I guess it did. Yeah, in 2003, the investigations to characterize what that looked like and how far does it reach really began. So 2004, we see a site performance standard set at 200 micrograms per liter. And just to describe, a site performance standard sets the expectation at a sampling location that the concentrations above that level will, if they're measured above that level, that needs to be responded to. And then in 2005, we see something called a practical quantitation level of 5 micrograms per liter. That's actually should be practical quantitation limit. And that is the minimum concentration that is determined to be, that we can measure to with an acceptable level of confidence. And when we say acceptable level of confidence, that's actually a statistically determined level. So through the analytical method, there's an actual mathematical evaluation that refers to the amount of confidence you can have in your result. And so a practical quantitation limit is the lowest that is determined you can go with that level of confidence, with that necessary level of confidence. I'll just point that in 2005, that's when state of Colorado set a groundwater standard of 6.1 micrograms per liter. And in October, I talked a little bit about what that groundwater standard is, the regulation 41 for the state of Colorado. It's different than an MCL, a drinking water MCL. But I can get sort of some more information on that if that needs more clarity. Okay, so then, again, not walking through every piece, but I will point out in 2007, the liquid waste contained on site was sampled at 40,000 micrograms per liter, which is equal to, and I don't have this on that slide, but that's equal to 40 milligrams per liter. 2009, I'm going to point out, or 2008, 2009, I don't remember specifically which year this refers to, but you'll see the term piezometer, and I'm not sure everybody knows what that is. That's essentially a temporary well. They're designed with the purpose of grabbing measurements of how deep it is to groundwater. Their main purpose isn't for collecting groundwater samples, but you can collect a grab sample that you can use to inform future decisions on the site. So that's the difference between a piezometer and a groundwater monitoring well. And that's something that CDM Smith you may be able to ask them to speak more to is, okay, when they're actually on the site, what are they doing differently when they drill a groundwater monitoring well versus when they drill a piezometer? What are they doing differently when they sample it? What that means, it seems extremely technical and in the weeds, but it does become important when you're trying to delineate how far the plume reaches. They can become important differences.
Sarah, for your clarification, so what you're saying is that the piezometer is just determining how far down the groundwater is and not meant to be a sampling?
It's meant to be a temporary sort of fixture. If you want a long-term sampling point, you need to complete a groundwater.
Okay, so this is just like a one shot, one and done?
You can sample it repeatedly. It's just, and I think that's about the amount of background I'm prepared to speak to difference-wise. I think
it's impermanent.
Yeah, it's not intended as a permanent sampling point, a long-term sampling point. Specifically why and how and the differences isn't something I can really go into.
I'm just going to interject. Piezo just means pressure. So it's really just a head level measuring device.
Okay.
Whereas a monitoring well, you can measure the head or collect the sample. But you could have a permanent piezometer, you have a permanent monitoring well. It's just measuring the pressure and the level of the water in the.
Oh, I see.
That's what it's about primarily. So.
Starting in the 2010 to 2011, and from that point on, you'll see references to well names, like MW77-WD, that's monitoring well 77. So, if you turn up with questions about where those wells are and want to hear more about those specific events, we can go into that. B313, that's another well name. 2016 to 2017, the thing I'll point out there is that that's when the site performance standard expectation for the site and the PQL were reduced to 0.9 micrograms per liter, and that's what they are at today. And then, that sort of leads us to where we are now. And again, a lot more detail, or some more detail, I'll bring up when I go through the progress report, what that document is, where, what it refers to. But obviously in September of 2017, that's when the fourth 5-year review was completed and released in October. And that's obviously been a main topic of interest for the CAG. 2018, that the groundwater monitoring well was placed based on piezometer information. It was located near the piezometer with the highest concentration of 1,4-dioxane at the northernmost end of the well. That'll all be in this presentation. More specifically, we'll be able to look at the figures for that. And Les, do you want to go through the next steps area here? Or do you want me just to sort of touch on them? Or?
I think you'll cover it when you do your presentation, so.
So essentially, the north end plume response operations are continuing. That's the groundwater extraction and treatment monitoring. The practical quantitation limit is assessed annually. If nothing's changed, that might be the extent of the assessment.
How is that assessed?
I'm sorry?
How is the PQL study conducted?
How was it conducted?
I'm asking because PQL that you report for use is 0.9, right?
0.9.
1,4-dioxane. And 1,4-dioxane is not the only thing out there, but it's the indicator of where the plume might be. And 0.35 is micrograms per liter is what the state recommends. So what's limiting our ability to get down to 0.35?
Technology.
Technology can.
Based on what we're sampling, there's technology that can get to 0.35. It's called the 5200 method. It's used for polished or domestic water. But this is a plume that has multiple contaminants in it, a lot of interference in terms of the site itself and performance standards. We're looking at the lowest possible number we can get down to 0.35. And the laboratories come back with the internal standard that we're using, saying that the lowest that we can have confidence, lowest level that we have confidence in is 0.9. There is an MDL, not to get too far in the weeds, of I think it's 0.15, but that just said we can see it, but we don't have confidence based on that statistical information that they have, that we have confidence that it's 1,4-dioxane. Okay, good. So, but the bottom line is there is no laboratory that we found to date that can get us to 0.35 under the current methodologies that we're using, which is 8260 and 8270 sims.
And I see Dave has a comment or question back there too.
What do you mean by other contaminants? Are you referring?
Not the plume. I mean, I said the site.
So just to pull back a little bit, I just say that this is a topic it's a difficult topic. This isn't the only site where it's come up. And it's a question that's sort of being assessed on a broader broader level too, by both the state and the EPA.
I don't have anything to add, but probably not worth going into any more detail.
I can answer the question if we want to. Your question, Tom, is how do they do it? They collect samples from the site. They submit them to the lab. And exactly what Les said, given the methods that are being used, that's the level they can achieve.
And the difficulty to getting down to 0.35 is a broader topic. It's not just a Lowry landfill problem. It's a broader topic.
So is there a different method that they can use that we get down there?
Different labs, yes.
So are there
different methods.
Labs that would do that? Have EPA looked at these different labs?
I think that would be a topic that we can present to the public to get better clarification, because it's somewhat complicated, and it will be time consuming to really get into the weeds and explain it to a level of specificity where we can really have the audience understand the difference in the methods and why we feel and the laboratories cannot validate a level that's lower than, in the case of the Laurie landfill, 0.9.
I like that idea, Les. Tom, with the CAG's permission, if you're interested in that topic, maybe we take it up on a future meeting.
So this is a topic more about the methodology.
Why we can't
Yeah,
get to
to the-
0.35.
And why we can't get.
Yeah, we can do that.
You know, we'll come back to that towards the end of this meeting and I think keep asking questions as they're relevant to the topics being presented, but we'll come back to that to flesh it out a little more and figure out how we can be responsive to the questions.
I think that would be an excellent subject because in the past, I know that Denver has mentioned that Denver Waste Management have used WEC laboratories. And talking with WEC laboratories and 2 other labs, they say they'll get down to 0.35. And so I'd like to understand a little better what we're talking about here. Saying, do the other chemicals at Laurie, does that make it difficult?
We can have our chemists do a presentation on that if you need it.
Great.
Good. We'll come back to that at the end in terms of future meetings.
And I think I'm gonna leave the timeline with that, and just again reiterate that the site documents online are, that's something EPA is working on being more consistent and more complete with. But again, getting 20 documents all at once, that's a lot of homework. So I guess one way that the timeline might be helpful is if something stands out, 2016, things were happening that I have questions about, sort of zoom in, okay, what documents are dated that year? Also draft.
So once Sarah has a chance to refine this, correct typos, whatever, it will be up on the website. And so, okay. Do we need to dim the lights for this next presentation, Sarah? Okay, so maybe can we dim the lights and then we'll flick it back on for more discussion? It'll get done. All right, so does anyone not have the PowerPoint? Dave, Karen, I saw you walk in. Hi, do you want to say hi?
Hi. Sorry, I'm late. I'm Karen
Yeah.
And did you pick up all the materials, including the PowerPoint? So you might grab the PowerPoint presentation because this would be a useful thing to take notes on if you want.
So again, my goal is to be able to speak to or explain or provide insight on, or just organize and collect the relevant information for topics that CAG's interested. This document was communicated to me as being something that you guys were interested in hearing about. So I'm taking a stab at doing that in a responsive way, but if I'm missing the mark, let me know. So this document is the progress report submitted by the WSDs in September of 2017, describing the work that they've done to assess the northern extent of the 1,4-dioxane, that sheet. So I figured I'd just start with what is the document, put into context, why did they put it together, based on what, and then summarize what it contains. EPA submitted a comment letter on that document, so I tried to summarize the points in there, the substantive points in there as best I could, and then I figured that's not going to take that long, mostly. But I have the document up on that computer, and if we want to go through it, or if there's questions about any pieces. So okay. This is a progress report. Again, it's just an update about the work being done, that has been done. Response to the work that was done according to a work plan that EPA agreed to in 2014. I have references to all those documents on the, I think it's like the second to last slide of the PowerPoint. So in that dated depo documents online, here's the ones that I found most relevant to this discussion. So it was done in response to this work plan that EPA agreed to in 2014. And that work plan was later updated with a couple of revisions to an addendum to include a couple more specific sampling points, call out wells by name, and require that sampling be done all at the same time so you could get a snapshot. I'll go into a little more information about that, but just wanted to introduce that work plan piece. So this is part of the ongoing process at the Superfund site. And yeah, I guess next slide. So this is, okay, this is going to be, as we go through it, a lot of text as you have a sneak peek of. I don't intend to sort of weed through it. Again, this handout's now more of a resource than it is a presentation, but just to sort of summarize what I just tried to describe. This is a description of the work performed by the WSDs under this work plan. The work plan objective is to assess the northern extent of this offsite plume of 1,4-dioxane. The work plan requires that the assessment be done to 0.35 for the site practical quantitation limit, whichever is higher, and that is the site practical quantitation limit. So according to the work plan, this is to be done to 0.9 micrograms per liter. Just to skip ahead to revision 1, part of revision 1's purpose is to clarify that while that 0.9 micrograms per liter is what's relevant at this point according to the work plan, where samples are collected, analysis needs to be conducted down to the what is called the method detection limit. So this is below the amount of confidence we like to see in sample analysis to really be certain of the concentrations we're measuring. But we can estimate, or labs can estimate down to 0.15 for 1,4-dioxane here. So part of revision 1 is clarifying that where samples are collected, concentrations should be estimated as low as possible, which is 0.15 micrograms. That's the J value data. So where you see data on figures or in tables with a J next to it, just translate that in your head to estimate it. This is below what we truly have confidence in, but it's our best guess. So the work plan involved defining and installing a temporary well transect perpendicular to the direction of groundwater flow. That's, not that this is much use, but that is identified at Mississippi. My next slide doesn't figure anything. And Mississippi Avenue, East Mississippi Avenue. So that's the transect that the work plan referred to. And so those transect wells to date have been drilled and sampled. If the sampling shows that 1,4-dioxane concentrations are below the PQL 0.9, then the next step in the work plan is to locate a permanent well in that transect for monitoring. If they were above, then additional wells to sort of extend that boundary may need to be added. The detections in that transect were below the PQL. Again, revision 1 clarifies that sample analysis needs to estimate down to that method detection limit of 0.15.
And then it calls out by name the wells that were to be installed as part of this process. Anywhere you see the name with PZ in it, that's a piezometer rather than a monitoring well. And again, I don't have a description or know have ready for the difference specifically in the drilling of a piezometer versus a monitoring well, but that might be a good topic to touch on in May. And then revision 2 essentially clarifies that all of the wells in the transect should be sampled at the same time to get a snapshot in time of what that concentration profile looks like.
Sarah,
Yes.
just to clarify with you, if they have a J value, that should never be used in solid data from the site. Should it? J value is just estimated?
J value is estimated, but how you use it, I guess, depends on what question you're trying to answer.
But if it's estimated, how could you use it as a final number in data?
It depends on what question you're trying to answer. So
Can you use it for quantitative purposes? I think that's the question.
Yeah.
Is it just qualitative data?
yeah, so I mean, you know that it's below the PQL because if it was above it, you know, it wouldn't have that J on it for that reason. And so I guess it depends on, all right, what are you using that data to determine?
I wonder, would we ever use J data and say a one of the O&M reports is final data of this is the amount that we found in this well?
I would say is the estimated amount. So if you're trying to answer the question, does this water at this well meet the state standard? I don't think you can answer that with estimated data.
That's what I'm.
Does it meet the PQL? I think you can.
Okay.
You can use it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Next one. So this is just a zoomed in. So this is East Mississippi Avenue. And this is sort of that, the 2015 work done that's described in the progress report, which involved these 4 dots in the middle, the drilling and sampling of them, and you can see the sample results there, and those all have J's. These are non-detects. And then the 101 and 100 are J values, so that's estimated data. And
Question, clarification? You're saying that those wells along Mississippi are non-detect for what level?
These 2 are the ND.
2 and 3.
Right. 102 and 103 are non-detect.
Okay.
0.15. That's what that means, less than 0.15.
Less than 0.1. No detect. Thank you.
And then these stars are the locations of the added piezometers for the next step. And then here's this snapshot. I think it was August 2017 data in there. I have it.
That's correct.
Yeah, August 2017, values in green for VOCs, and then the values in black for 1,4-dioxane. And
Sarah, can you tell us the depth of those wells?
they're like 45-ish.
Ish. They vary, but it's probably 30 to almost 50 in some cases.
I actually can tell you that because I have in this report. I'm going to look up one specifically, but they include the well construction log. So this one's 30 feet.
this one is 33, 48.
So those numbers are available for each one.
Yeah.
So what is the bottom depth of the
How did they
groundwater?
choose how low to go? So with each one, they were looking to hit the, what's called the weathered, unweathered interface. I have it here, but I don't, we can project it. In my October presentation, I had that cross section that sort of describes that layer that you get to, which is understood to be less transmissive, so fluid doesn't travel through it as easily as the sediments above. So groundwater flow and contaminant flow is assumed to go in the formation where it travels more.
So basically, groundwater does not travel lower than,
Right. That's the, yes, that's what
unless
they're
there's
trying to
sand
get to.
lenses
They're
or
trying to
something like
get to
that.
that level.
But the depth of the wells, they're in a figure in that September
Yeah,
22nd progress report. If you really want to know the depth of each one, it's in there. So.
And it describes what they hit. It's sort of hard to talk about because there's not these bright white lines, you know, where fluid does go, fluid doesn't go, and where this, this formation layer ends and where this one begins. But yes, that's exactly the concept. They're trying to get down to this weathered, unweathered interface, and the unweathered sediments don't transmit groundwater the way that the weathered ones do. So we can go to the next slide for now. The report also contains recommendation from the WSDs, and that's, the first one is quarterly collection of water level data from this transect. The idea being to confirm the depth to groundwater. That's what potentiometric surface means. There's a lot of different words for it. Hydraulic head, that's the elevation to which that groundwater is measured. But it's how far down you have to go until you reach water and what that looks like compared to the other wells. Because from that, you can get an idea of direction of groundwater flow. Groundwater is going to flow from areas with more groundwater to us. And to do that over the course of a year to see if seasonal influences change anything, rainfall, no. Another recommendation is to collect and analyze groundwater samples from the transect, just as a confirmation step of those values, and they are estimated values. So, and then to install a permanent groundwater monitoring well adjacent to the existing piezometer, NEPZ 100. That was the one with the highest concentration. It's got a transmissive sand unit in it that's assumed to be sort of the center of mass at that point. That was put in on March 5th, 2018. That was completed down to the weathered, unweathered base, and sample that for 1,4-dioxane. I don't know if the initial, I assume the initial sampling has been conducted. We haven't received that report or I haven't seen it yet. So I'm really interested on what information we get from that well, because again, it's completed in a way that, you know, at least conceptually is more reliable than the piezometer. So. EPA wrote back a letter, and I just have a few points to summarize from it, just trying to hit the highlights or the really substantive pieces as best I could. Essentially, EPA says, we don't object to you putting in that monitoring well in the location you've suggested. And again, it was drilled and monitored. And the next step, as Les was sort of referring to earlier, the next steps for delineation of the plume remain an ongoing discussion. That will be partially informed by the results from this monitoring well.
Sarah, you might have said it earlier, maybe Les, you did. Do we know when we're gonna get the first results from the sampling of the Sentinel well?
Typically within 60 days, we'll get it from the WSD, so.
Okay, so it's been
Yeah, it should,
sampled after the
it was
well
just
was
installed in March, so probably sometime early.
And then the letter also clarifies that, as is specified in revision 1, that analysis needs to be conducted down to the method detection limit where samples are collected, and that the 5-year review identifies the need to establish the plume profile in a vertical way, not just a lateral way. There's a couple of spots where EPA requested clarity in this letter, and some of that's sort of where certain features are selected in the lithologic log, full diagrams, why this depth was chosen instead of that depth for some pieces. I have to admit I haven't gone through each of those for the clarity on, so I can't speak super specifically to that. And so when you're looking at characterizing plume boundaries, where you collect a sample point, you have information on the concentration there. You could say, okay, this is the concentration there. And then in between those points, you can guess. Okay, well, it makes sense knowing what we know about the geology, knowing what we know about these concentrations, that this boundary sort of extends in this direction or not. Or so when you're drawing that boundary line and you're sort of guessing, or you have less confidence, dashed lines are used. And when you're really confident, like I've got 30 wells here and they all show this, so I'm really certain that the plume looks like this here. Solid line is used. That's a bit of a subjective component and does involve some decision making. So part of the letter asks for clarity on some places with that concept. And then it points out a couple of potential labeling errors. And then, yeah, so this just provides the links to all the documents are referred to with this. You can also Google the title, but when I Googled the title of this one, it didn't come up. Or I guess to be neutral about it, you conduct an internet search. And then these numbers on the ends of the links, those are the document numbers in the SEM system. So if you bring up the SEM website, you should have those documents. And all of these are online and available for. I think that's all that I have really. Yeah.
I think there's some. At least I saw one question. Do you guys want the lights back on, or do people want to refer to anything that's in the? Refer back to the slides. I'm going to turn the lights on. But Tom, did you have a question? Tom?
Yeah, I'm gonna receive my question with some understandings that I have, and please feel free to tell me if my statements are incorrect or my understanding is wrong. But the EPA has already determined that the flow rate of water from north of the site is 1,000 feet per year. Right?
That's not a number we're actually hanging our hat on right now. Those are numbers that have been out there, but that's part of that ongoing process and part of our efforts as we go forward with the recommendations in the 5-year review to try and answer some of these questions based on.
But at one point, they did say that they did do measurements,
So
and that they said that it was 1,000 feet per year was their determination.
and
right?
this is where people don't love modern hydrogeologists, but
We love you, Sarah.
The subsurface and groundwater flow is extremely variable. It depends on a lot of different factors in the geology that you can get tiny little windows into with well boreholes. Try to connect them in between. You can measure certain aspects of how those sediments behave, and then you can try to guess what that means for actual groundwater velocity flow. This is all done with modeling.
What they did do is they measured where the groundwater was in a certain year, and then they went out multiple years ahead and remeasured and found that it had gone 1,000 feet per year.
It was a tracer study.
And then that would take into account whether you've got clay or sand or whatever going that distance, and it would take into account adhesions to all that.
Kind of. So that was done, and Lee, I know you have more historical knowledge on this, so I'm gonna say something and then say if it doesn't sound quite right. That was done closer to the site boundary. Me personally, as a hydrogeologist, knowing how much these lenses come in and out, how much sediment changes, how much these boreholes in this one transect can vary, I would not extrapolate. I would not extrapolate too far north of the site, measured there at that location. So it's tough. It's tough and it's annoying. It's an annoying question to try to, or it's not an annoying question. It's annoying. It's a very good question.
Let me explain why I'm asking.
Yeah.
This is what you told me. It's been, since they started injecting water in there, if it's gone 1,000 feet per year, it's gone 3 miles. And 3 miles is exactly where you're testing. And so this may be diluted results.
So I guess just to blow on one thing you just said, talking about where we're testing, I think that's the thing to focus on. What concentrations we're pulling up at specific locations.
But they may be all diluted right now, is my point. By the groundwater injection.
I definitely hear you. What question does that bring up?
That brings up why aren't we going farther north and determining whether or not this really is diluted water, and is the plume actually, by the same calculation since 1984, it would have gone 10 miles. So why aren't we going way beyond where we are now and going ahead and testing to see whether or not that plume's out there? Because this may be diluted.
This is sort of dangerous territory for me to try to comment on, so tell me to shut up if I need to, but.
And I don't really think it's gonna really serve or be beneficial to really get in the weeds on this type of discussion, because remember, the 5-year review recommendations are giving us the opportunity to define a lot of this. Right now, we can make all types of assumptions, but we need definitive evidence, and that's what we hope to gain from the 5-year review recommendation, to see where we have to make these tests and do these studies. But right now, just based on a number of 1,000 feet per year, we can certainly say at that rate it should be at this distance, but we just don't have enough characterization information to extrapolate, from the site to 3 miles out, because there are so many different type of variables there, including different lenses, and it's just so much there.
That being said, the 5-year review said that we want to determine where the plume is.
Right.
Both the width and the length and the depth.
Right.
So you're testing in one area, well, you're testing all the way between that and the site. And you're coming up with evidence that I read some of the assumptions were that since this was so low in concentration that it didn't go more than maybe a few hundred feet or 1,000 feet. Plume doesn't go more than 1,000 feet beyond Mississippi. And that, I'm thinking, if we've got that much question as to whether the study that EPA came out with and said that yes, it went 1,000 feet a year, if you're not sure if that's true, then you've got to consider that yeah, this may be diluted, and the values we're getting may be absolutely wrong. So one of the things we need to do to make sure it hadn't gone farther north is test further north and see what the concentrations are. Is that wrong?
I think Sarah was going to say something like that. I am understanding what you're saying, and I don't think I can speak specifically to it for this site. The only thing I think I might be able to add that just provide some perspective in a super fun broader sense when evaluating groundwater contamination, especially in a developed area with water. If you don't have connection back to your site, then whatever sample results you get from a well that you put out, somewhere can't be attributed to your site. So
I think it can be. If you test for tetrahydrofluoride, which is a contaminant that seems to be a contaminant that should be only in this site. And if you go further north, first of all, you test for tetrahydrofluoride in the site and make sure it's there. But the Roche chemical basically dumped a lot of it there. At least that's the history of this site. It's a chemical which has characteristics that's very close to 1,4-dioxane, so that goes along with 1,4-dioxane, actually to go a little ahead of it. It does not get absorbed onto various strata that it goes through. It is highly soluble in water. It's nice that it's not very toxic, but it can be used as a indicator that whatever you find did come from this site. So we can go north and tell you, and it would tell you that that is coming from Lowry landfill, that there's the 1,4-dioxane increases to the north. And the tetrahydrofluoride,
Furan, I think you're saying, Tom.
Tetrahydrofuran, if that increases and is equivalent to what it should be for if it's mixed with 1,4-dioxane, then that's telling you it's coming from Lowry.
Yeah, let me take a shot at this, and my answer will be simplistic, not being a groundwater hydrologist. But I think, Tom, the question that you and the CAG are asking is the same question that EPA is asking in the 5-year review. We're all very curious about the northern extent of this plume. We're working with the work settling defendants to come up with a work plan to define what that looks like. I absolutely hear what you're saying with the idea of trying to fingerprint some chemical in the water, and certainly that can be done. Will it work here? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think we're prepared to answer that tonight without first thinking about a work plan on how to really delineate that plume. It's an industrial area. There are other potential sources impacting water quality, and we also have this injection of potable water. And to the extent that that injection is modified, the volume of it might change. That could easily change the speed at which groundwater flows through the system and how far it goes. So I think we're collecting data now. We're getting data about a certain baseline, and the baseline includes injection of this potable water. And as conditions change, and as we try to devise a way to really understand the extent of the plume, we'll learn more. But I don't think we can answer tonight for you, yes, we should go 10 miles out and collect water from a well, because I don't know if that will give us the best answer.
Well, even 1 mile.
Or even 1 mile, yeah.
whatever.
I think we need to collectively think about the best way to move forward to delineate this plume. And I think that's the work that will be done in response to the 5-year review questions.
And Bonnie has a quote, Bonnie, and I think Molly too. Part of, I think, the ongoing work with this CAG is to be able to have folks raise questions like that, like, why aren't we doing X? Both as suggestions and as to get responses about why that may not be happening yet, or if it's part of the plan or whatever. So it's both, I think. I think it's input, and it's also part of the Q&A understanding.
So
And I think we'll be better
CPA
for both.
CPA also is concerned that some of the results we may be getting are inaccurate because they've been diluted by 100 million gallons of water that we injected into the ground.
I think that potable water injection gives us a certain baseline. And if that baseline changes, we need to understand how it will change. And I also wanted to respond to Ryan's comment. I do appreciate the questions and the comments. I think we'll be better prepared to have the kind of back and forth dialogue once we have a work plan in place to talk about how we want to approach delineating that flow. I don't think we're quite there yet.
And Thelma, I will remind you that you will have an opportunity to review that work plan. Once EPA and CDPHE has the opportunity to and come to a final draft on that, we plan on sharing that information with the community as well, to give you a specified amount of time to voice those concerns, present those questions so that we can respond to them in that format.
So there will be kind of a structural way to share suggestions and concerns along the lines of this. Lee had something earlier. Do you want to?
Oh, I want to hear what Lee has to say.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to clarify something that EPA may not be ready to stand behind that 1,000 feet per year number, but it was not a tracer test that was conducted where they injected a tracer. These were simply anions and cations moving through the aquifer under potable water injection conditions on a large scale in section 31 north of the site. So we haven't talked about what a slug test is versus an aquifer test, but this was a large scale test that was conducted over years. And so it gave an overall average on the order of 1,000 feet per year. So there's water moving through the system faster than 1,000 feet per year. There's water moving through the system less than 1,000 feet per year. What you're speaking of is the overall average being about 1,000 feet per year. So when I start out a discussion, I try not to take the extreme one way or the other. You use the overall average. So compliments to you, Tom. You're doing your homework. I don't know if you're looking at the November 2014 work plan, but for reference, that has table 3 in it that summarizes those data. And I'll just bracket one other thing, that if you simply just do the math, the number we usually use for the beginning of waste disposal at the site is 1965. So you calculate the time frame there, whatever that is, 53 years since 1965, and 3 miles, and you can do the calculation for yourself. That's going to give you a number that equals greater than 300 feet per year. And the reason it's greater than 300 is because we don't know how far it goes beyond Mississippi, which is what you're getting at. And I think the real question you're asking is, are we making a false assumption here that the plume is slowly getting more lower concentration just naturally? And we know that the dilution has happened. And so your point is, does the concentration of the plume pick up? Does it go up farther to the north of Mississippi? So I'm just trying to clarify your question. I think that's your question. I think it's an excellent question. We don't have the answer yet. But the real point is, nobody will know what it is unless we go north of Mississippi. And right now, I think that's the big question. Are we going to do more delineation work north of Mississippi? And I don't know the answer to that. So anyway.
Is that something that's under discussion with this work plan to do that? Is that a topic?
The goal is to fully delineate the extent of contamination.
And that could include going north of Mississippi.
If the data shows us that we need to, we will.
And just one last thing, Tom's using an extreme estimate there, 10 miles. There's miles of aquifer there. It gets to Sand Creek before you go 10 miles, but he's just using that as an example to make a point. But honestly, you start looking at somewhere between 300 and 1,000 feet per year. That plume's moving pretty quick. And I'll say again, it's not just naturally moving that quick. That's because of the driving head of the potable water injection. That's what's making it go so fast. So we like to say, oh, there's no underground rivers in hydrogeology and so forth, but in fact there are. This is a fluvial system. It's a stream-derived bedrock system, and so we have to be concerned about those things, especially when we're exerting an artificial head on the aquifer like the potable water injection. So it's a great question. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody here knows the answer tonight. So
Fun. Thanks.
Bonnie knows the answer.
Bonnie, tell us the answer.
I don't know the answer, but I want to share a bit of information that to me has always been interesting when we're discussing how this plume is moving. Back in 1980, when Harding and Lawson and Golder were doing some work at the site, their estimate from their studies was this plume was moving without injection at 380 feet a year to the north.
Right.
And so once it started, we started with potable water injection. That's when we came up with much faster movement.
Right.
And I just think that's very interesting.
And the same thing was going on from 65 to 80 when the 138 million gallons of liquid industrial waste was being put in. That's basically the same order of magnitude in terms of head pushing. This wasn't water. Too bad it wasn't water. But it's the same order of magnitude volume. 138 million gallons, 100 million gallons over 15 years versus now we're 17, 18 years on the potable water injection. So, yeah, you could criticize the fine-tuned aspects of that math, but your estimate target, that's the kind of question.
So I guess the say is that my concern and hope is that the water injection is taken into account. The flow is taken into account. And in trying to determine the limits of the plume, we take those contingencies into account and try to maybe even get to the point where we don't have any if we keep going north until the point that we say that there's no more signature compound. So there can't be anything else beyond that is, it's not affected by dilution anymore. We've gone far enough north. At least we're considering that, and when we decide the boundary, what it is north, how far it is, and how far it is to the side. Consider these questions that I brought up.
So this will be in the meeting notes, Tom, and it sounds like there'll be an opportunity to actually put those in context of a written work plan, and that's ready for CAG after it gets circulated. I am noticing it's almost 1:45, and we wanted to spend this discussion is a really meaty discussion, and it leads to a lot of other questions. And so one thing I want to make sure we have a chance to do is figure out what, from this discussion, what do folks want to carry over to the next meeting? Do folks want to hear from the WSDs on sort of a deeper technical dive on the progress report that Sarah just gave a broad overview of? And do you want to hear more about the methodology that folks were asking about in terms of why we can't get down to a 0.35 number? What do you want to do at the May meeting? Can we transition to that now, or are there other parts of this discussion we need to wrap up before we do? And I don't mean to cut it off artificially.
Can I ask one quick question too? I know the first meeting we had, there was some talk or some interest in having a toxicologist speak to the group as well. And I was just wondering if that would be something that the group would entertain as well. I think it would be really beneficial since we're talking about numbers at this level, as well as the potential risk assessment that may be involved as part of ongoing studies. So
Okay, so let me put that as a placeholder in terms of the toxicologist specifically, but yeah, Bonnie, what are your thoughts?
Can I share with you the discussion we had about at the work study session?
Yeah.
About whether we need a toxicologist. We're all very interested in hearing what a toxicologist might say about 1,4-dioxane and toxicity and health effects. But if there is a presentation, we know that there's a number of different agencies that have different ideas. And so how could we have some sort of a panel where we could hear from different agencies? Because everybody's doing their research now on 1,4-dioxane, it's a hot subject. And so who could we hear from? How could we hear from a panel maybe? And would this be something that would be good, say, to have and maybe in Murphy Creek? I'm not suggesting that's what we do, but people that live there have been asking these questions. We're just not sure at this point if we're going to get answers that won't really upset the public when we aren't really getting answers. Nobody knows what the toxicity is at this point of 1,4-dioxane. Nobody can give a clear answer with scientifically backed information. It's all a guess right now. The latest guess that I've heard is that 1,4-dioxane, like we've been concerned about the sumps in Murphy Creek pulling in groundwater, and if there's 1,4-dioxane in there, is there an effect on the family living there? And some people we've talked to say no, because it isn't airborne. And then we get another report that says 1,4-dioxane acts as radon. Well, which one do we listen to? And so that's why we've been hesitant, because we don't want people sneering at us because we ask these questions and we'd like to know. We don't want that. We want some real, honest to God, back and forth discussion, because nobody here knows that answer yet. So how do we have a meeting where we can feel that we've come away with some information that's going to make us worry or not worry?
Well, I think that first presentation will be that presentation to just educate and inform. What is a risk assessment? Why do we do it? What does it entail? What are the, exposure pathway that not specifically focusing on any chemical, including 1,4-dioxane, but there are many people that don't understand what is toxicology. How does that impact our decisions when we're looking at risk? I mean,
So you're talking more about a risk assessment rather than just a presentation on 1,4-dioxane?
Yeah, we're not talking about something just focuses on the chemical. We're talking about the process itself when they determine risk. And
that makes sense.
Okay.
So maybe we could have that risk assessment presentation after the plume is delineated.
It might help to have it before, so when you see that, you can see what. But
we've been told multiple times that for 1,4-dioxane, it's in cosmetics, it's in greater concentrations coming out of people's homes than maybe we're measuring here. And I think that if you can tell us that there are no wells, we've tested all the wells, and we can't find a concentration of 1,4-dioxane above this level, and then talk to us about what the toxicity of 1,4-dioxane is, then we've got a basis on which to judge, or people have a basis on which to judge whether or not they need to be worried. Right now, if we talk about all the toxicities, we haven't answered the first question, be able to say, hey, you're not even being exposed, or you're being exposed at this level.
That's why we've been pushing on the issues of where the plume is, how wide it is, how deep it is, and eventually we need to find out if anybody's shallow wells are impacted. That's why that's been important to us. If nobody's been impacted to date, we'd be more than happy to hear that. Thank you. We'd be very happy to hear that, but we don't have that evidence yet. And so that's what Tom is saying is basically what we came to conclusion at our work study session. But it's,
and I think you all said some degree of that at the last meeting after this came up at the February meeting, but you didn't explain all that. So that that's helpful. I mean, my sense is there's plenty to talk about in the upcoming several meetings that we're not fishing around for topics, but it sounds like toxicity is gonna be an important topic at some point, and it's just a matter of timing.
And one suggestion would be just to share the presentation. If you would like to, Wendy does these presentations all the time. Wendy O'Brien, I believe is our Dr. O'Brien. So I believe she would be amenable to sharing her presentation with the CAG, so you can see if that would be beneficial and something that you would like.
If it's okay with everyone here tonight, I would rather wait till more of our CAG members are able to weigh in on this, because I know Murphy Creek people are would like to know more about risk assessment, 1,4-dioxane, but I haven't heard a real push for that. So if you wouldn't mind, how about the next meeting, we let you know what the poll resulted in, whether people would like this. And I would like to say that part of that would be the risk assessment, explaining your risk assessment, how you go about that and what it means.
Well, just so I'm clear, I think what Les has proposed, and I think it's a good idea, is to have one of our human health risk assessors, toxicologists, come and give a general presentation on what is a risk assessment, how is one performed, but hold off on presenting any information specific to 1,4-dioxane until we know what concentrations someone might be exposed to, because right now it would bring up more questions than answers.
Right.
And are you all saying then that at the that before even having the risk health assessment presentation, that we at the next meeting check in with people to see if that's a topic people want to schedule for the upcoming June meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I would,
Okay.
it seems to me that one of the important things is that since we're trying to delineate plume, and that's what this discussion was about, we haven't talked about delineating plume down yet. And I would like to talk about the fault that was found north of the site. The studies were subsequently done by the work settling defendants, where they had two of their tests for the site, or two of their tests for the fault couldn't be done because of electric wiring, because of sand, and that was many years ago. We've had to make some progress on how to delineate a fault. And I would like a discussion as to I'd like to consider that maybe the next meeting, the discussion will be that let's talk about that fault and how it's planned to delineate it with today's technology. Because if there's a fault there, that changes everything about what we're saying about the whether Dawson and on whether Dawson is whether or not anything goes beyond them deeper. And they can also include in that maybe the sand lenses and whatever other geologic thing that might be important in defining how deep this thing goes.
And there was a study done on sand lenses back in, Waste Management did it. And there was a report, and I've got it out in the shed. And that information on the sand lenses would fit right in with this as well. Only we need to know more about, I think the state's white paper should be brought in. I also think the study that Denver and Waste Management, and it's only a rumor because I never got it straight from Waste Management's mouth, but there was a fault that was also found under DADS. I don't know if that's a different fault than the state's white paper, but if it is, I'd like to know more about it. And the effect that the sand lenses and the faults have on the movement of the plume is important. But none of us understand it. We've never had that discussion.
there's a paper that will be going on to the website probably, if not this week, next week. It's a study that we had our geophysicists do in response to that issue that you mentioned, Tom. It's not all seeing and all inclusive, but it does give our it does review some of the information that has been provided that would indicate a fault. So you're welcome to pull that off and use that as a basis for, moving forward with further information. And I believe that
CDPHE's white paper.
it's in response to the white paper.
So is this something that could be, I'm kind of looking to the agencies now, but I mean, it sounds like we still have an offer from the work settling defendants to do a bit of a deeper dive on the progress report related to the work plan. We also have interest from you all about looking here and talking more about the depth of the plume and referring to some of the studies you just mentioned. Is that something that's could be on the table? How do you all feel about having some discussion about that? Agencies.
Well, Lee and I were just whispering. I don't know that EPA and CDPHE can be prepared in May to talk more about plume delineation and in particular the fault and the depth of the plume until we get a little bit further along in how we plan to, with the work settling defendants, really do that investigation to better answer those questions. I would hate to spend our time with speculation, for example, without having something really meaty to think about and talk about. With that, I don't want to waste the opportunity to have this meeting in May. The work settling defendants offered to talk in more detail about the progress report. We could talk about responses to the correspondence, Bonnie, that you provided to us tonight, and the resolution that the CAG made. Any other ideas for topics for next month? I'm looking at you guys.
I just want to give Bonnie some homework. If there's another fault in section 31, I'd be interested in it. Because to date, there's only been 2 faults identified. This would be a third that I would be very interested in. So
I think it's 1 of 2. Like I said, this was rumor.
I'm just going to tell you, the state has re-identified one that Waste Management identified way back in 90. EPA's identified another fault, a much deeper one.
That's 2.
There's
the rumor, I think.
Oh, well, that's it then. There's 2.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the rumor.
Yeah, there's 2.
So it sounds from Rebecca like this is a topic that can be discussed, will be discussed. There's understanding that it's an important one to the CAG, but that
We may not
probably
be quite
next
ready.
I would hate
next
to
month-
promise May.
Next
So-
month would be tough from both agencies' perspective.
Well, the other thing that I forgot to mention that we could potentially talk about in May is this whole method detection limit issue that we spent some time on earlier today.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
We could do that in May.
Yes.
And with that, is that some, okay. How does that sound? I mean, and Dave, I'm assuming that offer still stands for the work settling defendants? Yeah, okay, so if we focused on that, the method of detection issue, and then just what Rebecca was saying in terms of the CAG's recent correspondence and some responses. And then focused, and then with a placeholder for the depth of delineation, and maybe in June or when it is timely to really get into it.
I think that sounds like a good discussion. And as far as response to Clean's information to you tonight, I think that the main thing that we're looking for with the comment that we presented is be assured that those questions are going to be reviewed by either of your EPA contracting people, because we don't see that it's ever been addressed. And that's why we have the back sheet is a breakdown of the comment in total and what was not. We went through and reviewed it again, and none of those items listed have been addressed that we can see. And so our request in that letter by giving you EPA this, is we want to be assured that those issues will be considered when EPA is doing the 5-year review and asking for work plans. And it's just important to us because we submitted that a long time ago and we've never had any success in getting answers or responses. So we're not asking you to sit here and answer all of our questions in that letter and give us all of the answers at the next meeting.
But we will make progress and we can come up with
Yes.
a path forward.
And you can tell me and all of us where EPA sees the comments fitting in. That would be good.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very reasonable.
If you want to sit here and answer it, we will be ready.
So,
And I will have to say
Yeah.
that I will make the next meeting. My son
which
is
would be-
graduating from college on May 17th.
Congratulations.
Georgia State University. So
Congratulations.
it took him 6 years, but
That's
No more bills.
Look at all these people.
my Wilder Field player
Jennifer's
already.
daughter is
Oh, man.
graduating. And you're so, oh my goodness.
wow.
Very good.
Congratulations, Buzz. All right,
all
so
of
you won't be there, but I think as of now, everyone good with third Thursday of May. It would be May 17th. And thank you, everybody. I want to especially thank Sarah for putting a lot of effort into preparing really
Thank you.
dense material and making it comprehensible.
Thank you. And we have to give Janine kudos.
And big kudos once again to Janine. We'll see if this worked. Well, I did want to mention, about the tour. Does someone want to mention about the tour and when it's happening and anything more about it?
Sure, I will. I'm Jennifer Webster with Blueprint Strategies again. I know that there's been interest from the CAG to tour the site. Jennifer Harrison and I have been trying to coordinate on this, and you all have seen a Google poll from me. The results of that poll so far, we gave 3 options for the tour. There was one on Thursday the 17th that would be held just prior to this meeting. And then we gave 2 options for a Saturday tour. With the latest votes in, it looks like we're going to try to do this on Thursday. But I did want to note for the CAG that our original invite was from 3 to 5:30 for that tour on Thursday. And in talking to Dave, and Jennifer, we discussed maybe moving that up a little earlier in order to give everybody here sufficient time to come here at dinner. So maybe by a show of hands for those who are interested here in coming, does 2 o'clock present a problem? The difference now would be between, y'all responded to 3:30 on Thursday, so we would move that to 2, and maybe I'll just send that to pull out. But Thursday, looks like it's the date, Thursday, May 17th for the tour, and we would start that at 2.
Any glaring concerns? Okay.
And we'll get an agenda out and location and all the details through Jennifer.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Thank you for organizing that. That's great. And do you want to say something, Jennifer?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Jennifer, you mentioned food, and
Oh, yeah.
and I know that would be a delicate topic. Would you want to address anything with that, or you guys keep that in mind? You know, put that together.
Sure, yeah, I mean, we had discussed, given that everyone's gonna have time constraints, and that's a lot of time for everybody to devote to the CAG. We had offered cater dinner, and I don't know if that's something that this group is interested in. We can certainly bring in food here, wherever the meeting is gonna be, or feed people on site. So we're just putting that option out there, and don't know, Jennifer, how you wanna get people to respond to that, but just know that the option is there, we're willing to.
So it sounds like that the Lowry Trust is offering to have dinner. Normally, Tom and Emily single-handedly take care of food so we can all survive until 8. So does anyone have any initial thoughts about that? And this sounds like this sort of a one-time thing because of the tour. Do you any initial comments? And I think people can also discuss this offline and respond to me if you have any thoughts about it.
And you won't offend us if you don't want our food.
It depends. Can you submit like a provisional form?
Right.
Any comments about that before we adjourn? You want to just follow up later? What?
I thank them for offering this. That's great.
Thank you for the offer.
Yeah, it's going to be a long day, so I think that would be good.
It sounds like the early response is that it's welcome.
Yes.
And yes, sounds like a big thumbs up for that. And, we'll let you know if that
there's
And
other
I
comments,
also
but
threw out, if anybody for whatever reason is uncomfortable with, accepting the, food, obviously, you can also bring that on. So, assuming that you guys are not.
Are you trying to bribe us?
Just to ensure it's not right, no one thinks it's right. Lee.
I wanted to thank Sarah too. Excellent presentation. I also wanted to thank Kelly McGregor from CDPHE for setting up all the stuff here.
Yes,
Certainly couldn't have done it without
together
her.
with Janine, yes.
With Janine, yes.
Yes.
Janine doesn't get all the credit as much.
No, but Kelly gets some. Kelly deserves some.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for being here. See you in a month. Take care. Expect draft agenda.
I think food would be great if there's pie.
Oh, pie.
There you go.
Pie is the special request.
He's looking at me.
Right, exactly. Expect all kinds of like dietary restrictions.
I know I was distracted with
So
the
she's
technology,
not-
but
She's
she
worked for the
didn't sign in.
If you didn't sign in, see Kelly, please return your name tags if you
So she's not
would.
like Warren's replacement.
No. She's another
The information will
Janine.
be online.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's Janine Warren.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard who it is.
Where'd you go? I don't have any intention of.
Are you gonna be
I know.
I'm not gonna make that, but I've made amends with him already.
The next one in line is next year,
Sent him on his way.
but he's going on the grass.
He says, well, maybe I'll see Gary's retirement.
And then I'm
Which is- Yeah,
See it on Saturday.
in July is his retirement.
So, yes, I'm
And
gonna be in
that would be- Yeah, Warren's headed to France,
Immediate future.
so that'll be.
But it's just fun. It's great.
Anyway, let's talk about stuff. This is just unbearable. But
It's great that they're going.
that fall thing.
Yeah, and I think when the oldest one goes.
I wish we could talk for like 15 minutes about it before we close the fire off.
Maggie Bonnie, can I ask a quick question?
Quick question.
Just brought up-
Site Tim,
Second line.
control boundary.
Yes.
Here is, Jan.
No, I wrote my comment.